Hey everyone, welcome back. So picture this. You're about to head out on a trip, right? But this time, you're not just winging it. You're armed with all these insider tips most people wouldn't even think of.
It's like the difference between, I don't know, just reading a map and actually having a local guide whisper all the secrets in your ear.
Totally. And that's what we're diving into today. The kind of travel wisdom that can seriously upgrade your whole experience. We've got a bunch of different sources this time, some online articles, even a sneak peek into a traveler's ebook. And trust me, this isn't the usual pack light stuff. This is next level.
Oh, yeah, this is about getting the most out of every trip. It's about those little things that make a big difference.
Exactly. And what really stood out to me is how much of this starts before you even pack your bags.
Absolutely. The prep work, it's huge. It's like you wouldn't climb a mountain without checking your gear, right?
And one of the things our sources kept emphasizing was cultural awareness. Like, yeah, obviously don't be offensive, but it's deeper than that.
Oh, for sure. It's about understanding those unspoken rules, those little things that can make or break an interaction.
It's like showing respect without even realizing you're doing it.
Exactly. Like one example that stuck with me was this whole thing about leaving food on your plate in Southeast Asia.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
So easy to get that wrong. Coming from, well, a lot of cultures, a clean plate means you enjoyed the meal. But over there, it can be like saying, hey, you didn't give me enough.
Yikes. Imagine accidentally offending your host like that.
Right, and it's such a small thing. But knowing about it beforehand, that's what cultural awareness is all about.
So it's all about the prep work. Speaking of which, something I always struggle with is languages.
The language barrier, yeah.
I mean, I try, but it can be intimidating to even start.
I get it. But here's the thing. Even a few phrases beyond please and thank you.
It goes a long way, right?
Huge difference. Shows you're making an effort, not just expecting everyone to speak your language.
Shows you care enough to try.
Exactly. And it's not just about being polite. Think about if you need help, like an emergency.
Oh, right. If you can't communicate.
Those few phrases could be so important, even beyond the usual ones, too.
Like what?
Well, our source mentioned early tourism in Croatia. Back then, knowing a little German was more useful than English.
No way.
Shows you got to think beyond the obvious, right? Do a little research. You never know what'll come in handy.
Okay, so we've talked about packing our mental maps and maybe brushing up on some key phrases.
Right.
But what about the stuff we actually put in our suitcase?
The tangible essentials.
Exactly. And I'm not talking about the travel size shampoo. This is about being ready for anything.
Being prepared for the unexpected.
Yes, because let's be real, things happen on the road.
Oh, they definitely happen. And sometimes those cute little travel size things just don't cut it.
Speaking of which, our sources were really big on being prepared for, well, stomach troubles.
Traveler's diarrhea, oh yeah. It's not fun to talk about, but
It happens.
it's a reality for a lot of travelers. And the thing is, it's not just about discomfort. Dehydration can become a serious issue fast.
Especially in certain climates.
Exactly. That's why having the right medication and knowing how to use it is so important.
And our sources mentioned it's not enough to just pack what you'd use at home.
Right, because what's easy to find, one place might be impossible to get in another.
Or have a totally different name you wouldn't even recognize. Actually, one source told this story about getting sick and having to rely on these, like, local remedies, let's just say.
I can imagine. It's a good reminder that what works for one person might not be the best option in another culture. I mean, it's great to be open-minded, but
When it comes to your health.
sometimes it's best to stick with what you know, or at least do your research beforehand.
So we're talking about having a well-stocked first aid kit and maybe doing a little research on local pharmacies just in case.
Exactly. And don't forget to restock as you go, especially on a longer trip. Don't wait until you're in the middle of nowhere and realize you're out of essentials.
Solid advice.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a bit here, but another thing that can make or break a trip, and this might sound silly, but bathrooms.
Oh, yeah, the dreaded bathroom situation.
Our source had some, shall we say, interesting descriptions of encountering squat toilets.
A true travel rite of passage for some.
It's all part of the adventure, right? But seriously, knowing what to expect can save a lot of awkwardness.
And potential hygiene issues, too. It's not always glamorous, but it's part of being prepared. And on that note, let's talk about water.
Because not all water is created equal.
Exactly. Just because it looks clean doesn't mean it's safe to drink. Different places have different standards.
Our source was really adamant about sticking to bottled water or using purification tablets.
It's a simple precaution that can prevent a lot of discomfort. You don't want to spend your trip glued to the bathroom.
Okay, so we've covered staying healthy in, well, a couple of different ways. But what about staying sane in this digital age? Our source seemed pretty passionate about offline resources like maps and translators.
It's easy to get caught up in relying on our phones for everything.
Right, but what happens when the battery dies? Or you can't get a signal?
Exactly. That's where those offline resources come in handy.
So it's like a backup plan for your brain.
Exactly. Download those maps, grab a phrase book. Even having a digital copy of your passport can be a lifesaver. You never know when you might need those things.
You know, it's funny, we've talked about all this practical stuff, the planning, the packing, but sometimes I forget that the best travel moments, they aren't really about any of that, are they?
It's not just about the logistics, that's for sure.
It's about those unexpected connections, those moments that you can't plan for.
The human element. That's where the real magic happens.
Exactly. And our source actually had some really cool insights about how to make those connections happen more organically. Like, remember that bit about the power of observation?
Being present, really taking it all in.
Yes. Instead of always staring at Google Maps, like actually looking around.
It's like downloading a cultural map straight into your brain,
Well,
just by paying attention.
It's about noticing those little details, the sights, the sounds. It makes you slow down and really experience a place.
Exactly. And that's what often leads to those genuine interactions, too.
Right, because then you're not just seeing a place, you're feeling it. And speaking of interactions, I thought it was interesting how our source emphasized that talking to locals who speak English, that can be about more than just getting information.
It's about recognizing that everyone has a story to tell, a different perspective.
It's about being open to those unexpected conversations, even if it's just a quick hello in the local language.
Even a small gesture can make a big difference.
It really is about being open to those little acts of kindness. Oh, and remember that bit about packing extra adapters?
That's one of my favorites.
It's such a small thing, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Like, I'm here to help.
It's that spirit of generosity, that traveler camaraderie. It's really special.
It's true. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today. We talked about the essentials, the practical tips, but also the importance of staying open to new experiences.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Wow.
Being prepared, but also being present and open to whatever comes your way.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up completely, there was one last little detail from our source that really stuck with me. Registering with your embassy when you travel. Have you ever done that?
I'll admit I don't always do it.
Me neither. But it got me thinking, in a world where things can change so quickly, maybe it's not such a bad idea to have that extra layer of support just in case. So as you're planning your next trip, maybe that's something to consider. And in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. What are your best travel tips, those little things that make a big difference? Share them in the comments below. Until next time, safe travels, everyone.